Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. This is my book, and I will have it outside in my car if anybody's interested. My story happened back in 2005. I was sitting outside on my back steps, and I was talking on a cordless phone, and my husband at the time, he worked at an area plant. He was an electrician, and he had just got home from work, and
Excuse me. Can you hold the mic up?
oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me better?
That's better. Yes, that's better.
Okay, hold it up like this. Okay. So he had just got home from work, and it was starting to rain, and I had asked him if it was okay if I talk on a cordless phone in the rain, and he had told me it was okay. So I continued talking, and I had heard this loud crack of thunder, and the lightning bolt came out of the sky and hit my arm.
Oh my.
And I felt this horrendous searing pain when the lightning hit me. And what happened is it traveled underneath the house. After it hit me, it traveled underneath the house and hit the transformer that was in front of our house. And it rendered our neighborhood without power for about 4 hours. And after it hit me, it knocked me to the ground, and it left char marks on the concrete steps where I had been sitting, where my rear end was and where my feet were, was these perfect char marks on the steps. You could see where I was sitting, where my feet were, and where my rear end was. But I went to the ground, and my spirit just peeled up out of my body. And I went into my house, and everything in my house didn't look like my stuff. It was like I had gone back into the 20s or 30s, and the furniture wasn't my furniture. Everything had this burnt gold look to it. And I remember looking at the furniture, and it wasn't my furniture. And the curtains weren't my curtains. And I was sort of wandering through the house, and my children had just got home from school, and of course my husband had just got home, so I knew that they were in there, but I couldn't find them. There was nobody in there. And I kept hearing this old-time radio show playing in the house, and so I was walking through the house, and I was trying to find this radio show, and there was no power, so I didn't know where that sound was coming from. And so I'm walking through the house, and nothing was my stuff, and I started to panic, and I was thinking, what's happening? I mean, I knew I had just been hit by lightning, and nothing was making any sense. It was my house, but nothing was mine. And so as I started to panic, that's when I went into these beautiful pink and gold clouds, and I didn't move up or down, I went sideways. And I started moving very quickly through these clouds, and there was a presence with me, this huge, big presence, and it was a loving presence. And I felt just enfolded in this presence, like a big, huge blanket, just surrounded me. And the love was like nothing I've ever felt in my life. It was so huge and so big, and just filled every fiber of my body. And I moved very quickly through those clouds. And once I got through the clouds, that presence was still with me. And I found myself in this beautiful garden. And it was like nothing I've ever seen before. The colors were so rich and so vibrant. There were flowers and trees and birds and and the sky was blue, and there were clouds, and there was a sun, but there was no sun in the sky. You know, it was like a sunny day. There was a stream, and it sparkled like diamonds, and as it went over the rocks, and the trees were just magnificent, and the grass was so soft against my feet, and the air was so sweet and crisp and clear, not like anything that you've ever seen here. But when I got there was 2 men that greeted me, and they had blonde hair and blue eyes, and when I first met them, I thought that they were angels, but they weren't. They were my 2 brothers who had died as babies, and it was absolutely amazing to have met them. They looked like young versions of my dad. They were between the age of 20, late 20s, early 30s, and they were wearing this cream-colored, tightly woven linen clothing. Looked like lounge clothing. They looked like they'd actually been out on the beach all day. Their hair was tousled. Their skin was glowing. They kind of looked like surfer dudes. It was magnificent. They looked like young versions of my dad. When they smiled, they were just so beautiful. And it hit me all of a sudden. It was like, wow, you know, it was Michael on one side and Stephen on the other. And it was just like a family reunion to be with them again. And so it was after I met them, I was given the information that I had died, and then I had my life review, and that was an old-fashioned movie reel, and like seeing a movie, and it was very quick, and it was seeing everything from when I was a baby until that moment that I died, and it went very quick, but there was no feeling involved in it. It was just for information. After it was over, I was kind of surprised because I thought, is that it? You know, I thought my life was kind of boring. You know, I thought there was supposed to have been more to it than that. But I learned at that point that God doesn't judge us, we judge ourselves. And there was nothing but love through all of that. There were a lot of other people that seemed to come around at the time that I was having my life review, and I knew these people from somewhere, but I didn't know where. They knew me and I knew them, but I just didn't know where I knew them from. And what was interesting about it is that they seemed to come from all different time periods. There were women in beautiful gowns and men in fancy suits, and there were people in modern day clothes, and every time period in between. And they knew me, but I didn't know where. And I knew them, but I didn't know where. And they were all gathered around me for support and love. And they all seemed to be around the age of mid-20s and early 30s. And everybody seemed to be about that age. And what was interesting is everybody had this internal glow. Everyone was healthy and strong and happy, and it was just amazing. And the love that came from everyone was so amazing, because I've never felt anything like that here on this earth. So after my life review, I heard the words from a male voice, and by the way, that presence was still with me, that big, huge, loving presence. was still with me, pouring all that love into me. But I heard the words from a male voice say, what you put into the world comes back, or what you put into the universe will come back to you. Those were the exact words. And I'd never heard those words before, so I didn't know what that meant. Then I was given the information. It was kind of like I was given this, it was like having a giant IV bottle of divine knowledge. And I was given all of the answers to all of the questions of the universe. I was starting to get all this divine answers or knowledge. I don't know how else to put it. God was telling me how the universe was put together, and you know, all the questions that mankind has ever wanted to know the answers to. But I didn't have the verbal words to ask the questions before all the answers were given to me. And it was like one aha moment after another. And I just felt so blissful and happy. And it was like, wow, God, you're so awesome. You know, I kept saying, God, you are so simple. And we human beings make everything so complicated. And it's not that complicated, you know. And it was just amazing to know that he's really not that complicated. And we do tend to make things more complicated than they need to be. But anyway, that was going on, and it was just absolutely amazing. So then after that, my brothers were still with me, and this presence was still with me, and all these people were around. And I progressed further into this beautiful garden, and I heard music, and it was absolutely like a symphony. If you take the most magnificent symphony or orchestra that you've heard here, and you multiply that by 10 bazillion, if that's a number, that's what I heard. And it was like every leaf on the tree had an individual sound. The grass had a sound. Every flower had a sound. Every color had a sound. And by the way, heaven has colors that there's no words for. The pinks were pinker, the reds were redder, the blues were bluer. Everything was more crisper and more heightened and more beautiful than anything you'd ever seen. But everything had its own vibrational sound. And when you put all of those sounds together, that was what I was hearing. This orchestra, it sounded like stringed instruments were playing, and that was everything was singing praises to God. Everything, the rocks, the trees, the leaves, the flowers, the birds, everything, and all of it put together, and it was absolutely magnificent. It was so breathtaking. So I heard that, and then as I kept walking through the garden with my brothers and everybody, Jesus came out of this grove of trees, and he was walking with me, and I didn't even know. By that time, I was so focused on him that everybody else disappeared. I don't even know where they went. He was so breathtakingly beautiful. He had very long, wavy, dark hair, olive complexion, close-cut beard, brown eyes. He was tall, and he was talking about how much he loved me and not to be afraid, and that he'd always been with me. And he was talking with me. As I said, my brothers just kind of disappeared, and he walked me over to this wooded glen, and there were pine cones laying around and little flowers dotting here and there. And there was a log, and I sat down on the log, and on the other end of the log there was a man sitting there, and I knew that man was God. And he looked at me, and he had shorter black curly hair and a beard and the bluest eyes you ever saw in your life. And he was wearing a white robe and sandals, and he was drawing with a stick in the ground. And he looked at me and he said, "What would you do if it was just me and you?" And I didn't understand what he meant. And he said, "What would you do if it was just me and you?" And I was just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he said, "Come with me." And I followed him. And it was almost like he took his hand and he went like this, and it was like almost a zipper. And he opened up the sky, and it was the whole universe. He showed me the whole universe with spinning stars and rainbow-colored gases and planets, and there was nothing in it. No trees, no cars, no people, no animals, no nothing. Just that, you know. And then he said, she took me back, and we sat back on the log, and he said, "Now what would you do if it was just me and you? No parents, no husband, no children, just me and you." Well, I didn't have a proper answer. It didn't dawn on me that it really is just me and him. There is nothing else, just me and him. It always has been just me and him. But I didn't know it at the time. So I was looking at this oak tree, and I noticed the little life-giving veins in the leaves and the roots, and I noticed how everything was connected to everything else, and how important that oak tree was to the atmosphere, and how important that oak tree was to everything else, you know, how everything is connected to everything else. And that's what God wanted me to see. And I said to God, "God, you made this tree. You were in this tree. So when I see this tree, I see you." He said, "Yeah, that's right." Well, then I started quoting the Quran, and I don't know why I did that, because I've never read the Quran in my life. I know nothing about the Islam faith. I know nothing about any of it. And I said, "God, your 100th name in the book of the Quran is God is everywhere, God is nowhere, and God is in me." He said, "Yeah, that's right." I was like, "Really? Okay." And so then I started thinking about my parents, and I said, "God, you made my parents. You're in my parents. So when I see my parents, I see you." He said, "Yeah, and?" So I started thinking, and he was putting all these thoughts in my head. And I said, "Well, you made my husband. You're in my husband. So when I see my husband, I see you. You made my kids. You're in my kids. When I see my kids, I see you." And then I started thinking about people that are cruel and mean and have hurt me. And I said, "Well, you made them too. So when I see them, I see you." And he said, "Yeah." But he said, "Now I have a question for you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Well, when you look in the mirror, what do you see?" And I was like, "Oh, wow." Well, my normal answer would be, "Well, I don't see much. I just see me, nobody important, just me." But I knew that's not what you tell God. No, you don't tell God that. The creator of all things. I don't think so. So I thought, well, okay, God, you made me, you're in me, so when I see myself in the mirror, I see you. Oh, he was so happy. He was so happy. His eyes sparkled, and he was so happy. That was the right answer. He was really happy, and that made me happy. You see God happy. That's really the right answer. And what he taught me was, because I had spent a whole adult lifetime anyway, of people putting me down and treating me really bad. I had taken that into myself, and I started believing all of that. And what God was teaching me was that that's not true, that He sees me perfectly, even though I'm an imperfect human being. He sees me perfectly, and that beauty comes from inside. It's not what's on the outside at all, because beauty fades. Everybody's beauty fades, but true beauty comes from inside, and that's what God sees, and that's what He saw. And I needed to see that and not believe what all these other people were telling me. And that's what He was teaching me. And then it went a little bit further when He was drawing in the dirt. I don't know what those symbols were, but they were definite symbols of some sort. Anyway, I had to build fortress walls around my heart so that people couldn't hurt me, because people did. And I didn't trust people, and least of all God. So there was a moment in my near-death experience where He let me look in His eyes, and I could see in His soul. And I saw something so pure and so clean and so, I've never seen purity like that ever in my life, ever. It was so pure. And I could only stand it for a second. I mean, I could only, you can't stand something that pure for that long. It was beyond words. And it tore down all those walls, and I learned that I could trust God, that He was not going to hurt me. He was not going to abandon me. If there is anything in this world that you can trust, He is the one you can trust, because there's nothing but purity and truth and love, and that's what He is. And so all those fortress walls came tumbling down, and that one moment. And I'm going to read this to you because it's worded perfectly, and I can't word things perfectly when I'm nervous. But I realized that no matter how huge the universe was and how tiny I was in the grand scheme of things, I was a very important part of everything God ever created, meaning I had eternal worth because I was connected and interwoven to everything, like the golden threads of a tapestry. What God taught me was that every single thing He ever created is an extension of His love. God didn't create us to serve Him. On the contrary, He serves us so that we can learn to serve others in love with Him. That was the most important message. I wanted to make sure I got it right. But, so, that's my story. Then I came back. After that, 2 angels came, and they got me and took me to a calm lake, and that showed me future world events. And what I saw were things that are happening now. And then I was sent back to my body, and that's my story. So thank you. So if you have any questions.
How long ago?
This happened in 2005.
You mentioned these 2 angels took you to this calm lake and showed you future events that you currently see are happening now. Could you elaborate on those?
What I saw was, the first thing they showed me was events that stemmed from or was a result of the 9/11 attacks. They showed me the terrorism that was going on. They showed me the ISIS people, the heads coming off. They showed me the bombs. They showed me them coming into different cities and bombing people and shooting women and children and things like that. They showed me earthquakes and tsunamis and all that kind of stuff. They showed me 6 different waves of water hitting the land, lakes swelling, rivers swelling. They showed me there was one riots and the government's dismantling. They showed me money not being worth what currency not being worth.
US
They,
currency?
yeah, well, yeah. They showed me gold coins being used to purchase things. They also said we would eventually go back to the barter system, because they showed me chickens and pies being, they actually showed me chickens and pies being traded. They showed me riots in the streets. They showed me one particular riot where this man picks up something heavy and throws it through a plate glass window, and then there's a building behind it burning, and I heard 3 gunshots, and there's a man laying dead in the street. And my husband told me that was the Ferguson. I didn't even know what it was, and he told me that's what it was, which made sense. I was told, they showed me about there was a silver ribbon that splits the United States apart, and it was a river. It had a river attached to it, and there is the pipeline. And if you look at pictures of the pipeline, it looks like a silver ribbon that runs right through there, and there's a river attached to it. Also the Mississippi and the St. Louis? No, is it the St. Louis? There's a Mississippi that runs through there, I know that. But then there's another river that is connected to it, and then there's the pipeline. They showed me that, and then there is, they showed me a woman who was in a white car, and she was, her car was run off the road by floodwaters, and her little boy drowned, and people came. They called them angels, but they were people, had pulled them out of the water and brought the little boy back to life, and she went on to do some kind of spiritual video series. So they showed me that. They did show me there were going to be men. They showed me men in SWAT gear standing on street corners holding guns, like martial law, but they didn't tell me where it was going to be. They did say there were small pockets of places where people could go called safe havens in mountainous areas, and they showed me that in like lights. These were like small prayerful communities that were safe havens, and that's where they showed me that these were in mountainous areas.
This was in this country.
Yes.
Sharon, do you know why you were shown these things?
At the time, I didn't know why, and I was really shocked by all of it. I was horrified by a lot of it, and I was like, really? What am I supposed to do with all that? And when I see that the stuff comes to pass, you can ask my husband, I'm just like, oh my God, you know, it just, a lot of it sickens me. At first I was thinking that to pray about it, you know, because prayer changes things. But, you know, I think that these things happen because of our collective, not us, but the world's collective selfishness. And we can change the course of events by changing the way we are as a human race. You know, these things don't have to happen. And we can, you know, I guess if I talk about it, if I write about it, and let people know that this is what they showed me, we can stop it by praying about it and by changing our attitude. That's the only, I mean, they did not tell me why, but I'm assuming that's why.
Did you see anything positive?
Yes, those pockets of the lights, the safe havens,
Mm-hmm.
the prayerful communities where people gather. They showed, They are
Can we
in-
go there?
they are in the mountainous areas. I know, West Virginia,
Sedona.
You're in the right,
almost heaven.
you're in the right place. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Just so you know, are the prophecies in your book, do you go into detail about these future events in your books that we can read?
Yeah, I did.
Otherwise, it's quite fascinating. I'm sure we can keep asking questions about it.
It was pretty much just what I told you, but yeah, it's in there.
So you mentioned the positive parts were these prayerful communities, safe havens. Were there other positive prophecies perhaps that they showed, or is that pretty much it?
Pretty much it. And as with most near-death experiences, as time goes on, more and more detail comes back to you. So I've had more detail come back to me since I've written the book.
It sounds like these prophecies show the end of the United States as we know it. Did you get that from it?
What I have come to understand is that this world is not going to come to an end. It is going to change, but we have to change with it. I don't think that God made this world, as beautiful as it is, to destroy it. He's not going to let us destroy it. What I think he wants us to understand is that we have to change our ways. He's made enough room for everybody. He's made enough resources for everybody. And we need to learn not to be as selfish people as we are. And that he wants us to learn how to have that unconditional love for each other. You know what I mean? It's that agape love. I mean, that's how he loves us, and that's what he wants us to do. And if we do that, we can save this world. It's not doomed. And there's still hope. I mean, there's always hope, and there's still time, and it's not a done deal, and there's still time to change. People just have to realize that, you know, there are different ways of doing things.
Sharon, I agree with you 100%. But is this your own conclusion from your experience, or did the angels or somebody actually tell you that what you just said?
That's what they've actually told
They
me.
actually told you that.
And there's a chapter in here where an angel did tell me that.
Okay, good. Did God ever come back to say anything more, or was it the angels at the end? We're talking.
I'm sorry.
Did God or Jesus come back near the end at all, or was it just the angels at the end who were talking with you?
The angels at the end.
And they said what you just said?
Yes.
Okay.
Sharon, you mentioned that you got all the answers, all the questions that were. Were you able to still remember what those answers or questions were?
Sometimes it comes back, bits and pieces. It does. It's not like it was when I was there and I was getting it boom, 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 and there it was. But sometimes now it'll come back in bits and pieces, and it'll be like, oh, how nice, you know.
Do you have an example? Sharon?
Oh wow. Okay. You know how the scientists will write on the blackboards these equations that are 10 miles long to explain? That's not how it is. They've made it too complicated, and that's as per God's words. That's not how it is. That's what he told me. He even showed me the blackboard with the person writing on there, and he was explaining to me that that's not how it is. That's wrong. So I don't know. I was like, really? That's interesting. Why don't you tell them?
Was there knowledge about other dimensions?
Pardon?
Did you get knowledge about other dimensions or other inhabitants of the universe?
There are. There definitely are. I know that. He told me that. However, I don't want to see them.
Did he just tell you about them?
Yeah,
He
in
didn't-
what context?
He didn't show them to you, he just told you that there are other life in the universe, and you didn't see them.
I have had experience with since, yes.
Now that sounds really interesting because we've been having discussions recently, a number of us, about everything from demons to aliens and what means what, these entities. So it would be great to hear you elaborate on
If you're open to it.
Okay, he showed me, and I talk about it in the book. Since I came back, I have been able to see spirits. Like, they look just like you. And there was a time when I couldn't tell the difference between, I felt like a little boy from The Sixth Sense. I see dead people, you know, and I didn't know. There were so many of them at first, you know, they were everywhere. And I felt like I had a blue flashing sign above my head that said, if you're dead, come to Sharon, you know. and they would just come to my house and hang out. And I had one spirit, his name was Gray Eagle, and I loved him so much. He was so magnificent. And he stayed with me for like 5 years, 6 years. And my granddaughter saw him. I had a friend who saw him, and he was an artist, and he drew him actually. And I've come to find out that he was actually, he was real. And I have information about his life in the 1800s and so on. But God wanted me to know the difference between good spirits and not so good spirits. So I had to learn how to, what's the word? Discern spirits. So he sent, I guess, allowed a demon and his minions to visit me one night. And if people don't believe that there are demons, I'm telling you that there are, and that's very real. And this thing appeared in my backyard, and these little minion things were crawling all over my house, and my house was moaning and stinking like I don't know what, raw eggs or something. And I didn't know what in the world was going on. And I was just doing my laundry, minding my own business, and these things were crawling through the slats in the bathroom, and they were hideous looking. They had eyes all over them, and their skin, they looked like they were burnt. Their skin was coming off of them, and they were only about that tall. I called the police 3 times that night. They must have thought I was some kind of loon. And, but they dutifully came out and were with their flashlights looking around. But we had this privacy fence that was all around the back of the house with locks on it, so there was no way. But I don't know what, it was weird. But they came out, and these creatures kept crawling all over the house, and it was just horrible. And then finally, I took my dogs out the back, and there was this man that was standing in the backyard, and there was like a spotlight on him, and his hair was blown. He had long black hair, and he was a native man. And I thought, how in the world did you get in my backyard? The fence was locked. You couldn't get back there. And he had black leather coat on, he had black pants on, a white shirt, and he was beautiful, and he had a spotlight on him, and his hair was blown, but there was no wind. And I went out there to smoke a cigarette while the dogs were, and I thought, hey, how is your hair blowing? How did you get in my backyard? Where's that light coming from? Who are you? And it was just creepy. And then he smiled, and it was like, oh my God, my skin went cold. I slammed the door, and I said, in the name of Jesus, go away. And that instant I said that, he disappeared. The minions went away, the smell went away, everything went away. And it was like, oh my God, okay, that's the key to this, that was the devil, and he appeared as something beautiful until he smiled, and those things were evil. Whatever, the whole thing was just a setup. God was teaching me, and it was absolutely horrific. I don't know how to explain it. It was just horrific, but something inside of me I instantly said, in the name of Jesus, go away, and it all went away. And so that told me that was just evil personified, and the power of Jesus took it away. And so that taught me about evil. Since then, I have witnessed other evil events, and I have used the same words, and the same words have taken the evil away.
Is that part of your book also?
Yes.
Good. A lot of us have great interest in current spirits and ETs and demons and all, that currently exist. Are you good enough to see any spirits right now? Sometimes they're in the room with you, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to if you don't want to, but I know people who can, given rooms, see demons up in the corners, or whatever, wherever they might be, or spirits or ghosts or whatever you want to call them. Everybody has different abilities in that regard. So it's kind of neat to hear you say this.
Do I see any now?
Yeah.
I don't see anything evil now, no.
Not in this room.
Not in this room.
It's all good stuff in this room.
All
right?
good stuff in this room.
Okay, good.
All good stuff in this room.
We have a good group here, I know that.
Yes,
And
it's all
do
good.
you see any deceased people here? Any other spirits?
Well, her mom was with her.
She misses her mom, by the way.
I know she does. There's somebody with you too. Is that you?
I'm having a hard time hearing.
Your daughter's with you.
Shayna?
You got somebody with you too.
Do you know who it is?
I see somebody on your side, on that side.
I don't know who it is. Do you know who it is?
It looks like a woman. Do you have a grandmother? It's an older woman.
She's skinny?
Yeah.
Really, really skinny?
Yes, she is.
What color hair?
It looks sort of grayish color, a little bit of brown in there. I don't know.
I don't know.
She's with you though, whoever she is.
Can you communicate with any of these people?
Right now, I'm on cold medicine right now. You have to give me a break.
Sharon, you mentioned you had multiple near-death experiences?
I've had 3.
What were the other ones?
When I was 13, I drowned in a pool. I was having swimming lessons, and the instructor told me, you're either going to dive head first in the 10-foot end of the pool, or I'm going to throw you in. And I told him, I said, I don't feel right about this. I watched all the other kids do it, but it scared me and I didn't want to do it. And so he grabbed me and he threw me in. And I just sunk to the bottom. And that was the first one. And then I had the one in 2005. And then this past November, I had a emergency surgery. I had a bowel obstruction, and when during the surgery, I left my body, and I floated above my body, and I saw the tops of their heads, the surgical team. They had these hats on, and they were bent over me, and they were working on me. I saw their gloves, the surgery gloves, and I saw the tops of their heads. And then while I was hovering over top of my body, I thought that was weird. And then I went into this sort of rainbow glistening light. And then I found myself back in heaven again. And what was really funny was, instead of being in the garden, which was over here, and then there was a fieldstone wall that had roses growing up and over it, and it was right here. There was a beautiful meadow right here between the wall, or between the garden, and here's the meadow, and then here's the beautiful golden city that I talk about in the book. And I was standing right here next to the golden wall that surrounds the city of heaven. And the wall was real tall, and it was pure gold, and it was like a cement wall, and it was really hard, and I couldn't get through it, and I kept pounding on the wall and kept trying to jump up and down, and I thought, I can't jump this wall, I can't get through the wall. But like right down just a little ways was the gates to get in, and I couldn't move. I mean, I was right there, and I don't know if I didn't think to walk down that way or what, I don't know. But I was standing there, and there was this sweet little brown and white beagle puppy, and he was right there at my feet, and he kept barking and jumping up on me, and so I bent down and I was rubbing his tummy, and he was just loving all over me, and he was so sweet. So he was my little friend. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people coming out of the garden where I had been before. And I noticed that there was music playing in the city, and I could hear people talking, and I could hear dishes clanging, and it sounded like there was a party getting ready to go on for all these people that were coming. Okay, so I saw people from all walks of life, men, women, children. They were still in their clothes that they had died in. And I mean, I looked down the front of my body and I could see I still had a body. And that was what was interesting about the last near-death experience. I looked down the front of me and I still had my clothes on. And it was like, thank you, God, I'm not naked. You know, I have my clothes on. But I still had a body. It was lighter, but I still had a body. These people still had a body. They had their clothes on. I saw two men. They were Arab men, and they had the thing on their head and like robes on. I saw some little children. I saw a man who looked like he was from New York. He was a construction worker, and he had the jeans on and the boots, and he had a yellow helmet on it, a hard hat helmet, and he was wearing a vest that had tools in it. And he was coming across, and that field was tall, beautiful, soft grass and had wildflowers in it, and it had every color wildflower you could ever think of. Pinks and reds and yellows and blues and purples, and they kind of danced in the wind as the wind was blowing. But these people were coming out of the garden, and they were walking through that field of flowers and heading towards the city gates. And each person had an angel with them, and the angels were taller and more illuminated, and kind of glowed from inside, and they were wearing blue and white robes. And people were talking with each other and laughing, and there were two people that came into my view, and I recognized them. There was a lady on my Facebook page who had a son who had died several years previously, and walking with him was an older gentleman, and I recognized that this was her husband, which was his stepfather. And I thought, oh my God, I know that, you know, and they walked up past me to go into the city, and I said, I know you. And they looked at me and they smiled, and then they walked into the city. And then it was shortly after that I went back into my body. And when I came to, I was in the recovery room, and I was still hooked up to all these machines and stuff. And when the nurse noticed that I was waking up, he took me off of all the machines and stuff, and I asked to speak to the anesthesiologist, because I thought I had dreamt all that. And so I asked the anesthesiologist, could I possibly have been dreaming? And he said, no, there was no possible way. With the anesthesia that you had been given, you were closer to death than actually being dead. And he said, why? And I said, because I went to heaven. And his eyes got as big as saucers, and he looked through my chart, and then he left my room, and he wouldn't talk to me anymore after that.
So they didn't tell you coded or anything on the table?
No, he didn't tell me. He just looked through my chart, and his eyes got real big, and he wouldn't talk to me anymore. I went to my doctor for my regular checkup, and he did the same thing, didn't he? I told him, I said, I had a near-death experience. He said, you did what? I said, I went to heaven during my surgery. And his eyes got real big. And he started flipping through my chart and looking, and he wouldn't talk to me anymore about it at all. And I was just like, what's wrong with everybody? You know, it's like, I don't know if they thought I was going to sue them or what, but they refused to talk to me about it. But what was interesting is when I got back to my room, I got a message from another friend that this lady's husband had died that day that I had my surgery. And I knew that because I had seen him. And the second interesting thing is when I had told my daughter about the little puppy, she told me that they had had to turn her neighbor in because her neighbor had beaten his beagle puppy to death. So I told her that the beagle puppy was there in heaven and the beagle puppy was okay. So those were two confirmations of that. So the only thing I can say is maybe God wanted that to happen to confirm that Melody's husband was okay and with her son, which I told her, and I told my daughter that the puppy was okay too.
Since you've had these ongoing experiences, which are great, and since you have this ongoing psychic ability, which is great, have you ever thought of trying to consciously come out of your body and explore consciously?
I'm afraid to do that. Because I look at these situations as a God thing, and I'm afraid that if I do it myself, that it will not be a God thing anymore. And I want to give all the glory to Him. I don't want Him to be the one to do it. And I'm afraid of what I'll see if I do it myself.
So you don't meditate at all to quiet your mind and to try to go into that altered state of consciousness at all?
I pray. I don't meditate. I don't want to make something happen that maybe God doesn't want to happen. I don't want to. I have had experience of like astral traveling, but it happens. I don't make it happen. It just happens. I've had experience where I am awake and I'm walking and I end up in another place and I don't know how I got there, if that makes any sense.
You mean like missing time? It's later?
I had one instance where it was an ET experience and there was missing time. Yes.
I'd love to hear about that.
Did you see the ET?
It didn't want me to see it. It was carrying me back from somewhere. And it took me out of my house, and yeah.
Did you know what it looked like anyway?
It was big. It had to be big for it to be carrying me. It was carrying me like
Did
this.
it carry you through the house?
It carried me through a closed door. It came in through a closed door, closed locked door. And it squeezed me on the back of the neck, knocked me out, took me somewhere. And I came to before I was supposed to and screamed. And when I did, it put me down. And it came through the kitchen door, locked kitchen door, and put me down between the kitchen door and the dining room. And that's not where I was to begin with. and I noticed that all the chairs and everything in the room had been scattered all around, and I'm, how in the world did that happen? And what was funny is that my dogs were in a stupor, a weird stupor, and you know, dogs bark like crazy. These dogs weren't barking, they weren't moving. And my husband at the time was in a stupor, couldn't wake him up for anything. And between 2.5 and 3 hour time frame was totally gone. And it was the scariest thing I have ever experienced in my entire life.
Are there any traces of anything on your body, like wounds or?
I had bruises right back here, one here and one here, and my neck was so sore. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even turn my head. It was so, I had no idea.
So what do you think they did with you for 2 or 3 hours? Do you have any intuition as to what might have happened?
I don't know, but the joke was on them because I didn't. I had a hysterectomy, so if they were doing any of that, you know, egg transplant thing, ha.
My wife has had UFO encounters, and once she found some metal staples in her stomach, doctors couldn't explain after one encounter. So the question is whether they study you, whether they want to learn about human functioning. Why do they do this?
There is I have been, I know that there is a direct link to ET abduction and ET study, and people who have had near-death experience, people who have had spiritually transformative experience. They are very, there's a direct link there. I know that. It's knowing, they know it, and they are, it's like they have a beacon, and they know the people that have had those experiences, and they come after them. They want to study them. And that's what they do. They study them.
Here's a really big question we've been debating among some of us. Can you distinguish between the ETs and the demons as to their attitudes? Are they good attitudes, or helpful, or caring, or are they bad like demons? I mean, do you have any sense of the ET attitudes?
There are some of them that are good and some of them that aren't.
That are ETs?
That are ETs. Yeah, there are different, I want to call them species, breeds, whatever. I don't know. Some of them are good and some of them are not. It depends on which one comes after you, I guess.
Can you defend yourself by saying Jesus to them?
I have. There was one that came. I was staying at my mom's, my husband and I, because my mom had Alzheimer's and I was her caregiver. And there was one that was right outside the window, and of my bedroom window, and it was coming. And I saw they can make their ships, they have a way of making them look smaller. And anyway, it was hovering outside the window, and I knew exactly what it was. And I saw this orb-shaped thing, and it was pulsating, and it was this weird color, and I knew exactly what it was. And it was going from one end of the window to the other, and it was moving very fast, and I knew exactly what it was. And I stood in the middle of the room, and I said, "You cannot come in here. In the name of Jesus, go away." And as soon as I said it, was there for 2 nights, and as soon as I said that, it went bam, gone, and it did not come back. And it has something to do with boundaries. If you put up your boundaries and you say no, they won't come back. And I knew that night that thing took me away, and I heard the words boundaries. It said something to me, and I remember hearing it.
Do you have any sense at all as to what ETs want with humans? Well, why are they here, and why are they abducting, and why are they studying us, and why do they do these things? Any notion at all?
I can only make a guess. And I don't know if that's excuse me. I think some of them have good intentions and are here trying to help because we're screwing up. And they may be here trying to help us figure it out. And they may be helping us trying to stop what we're hell-bound and determined to do. Some of them, and some of them are here and are doing just that and have integrated in among us and look like us and act like us, and we don't even know they're here. Some of them are, you know, studying us because they're so far advanced and they're thinking, what is this race of people that are just, you know, hell-bound and just determined to destroy themselves? So they're studying us and they're thinking, okay, well, what can we learn from these people? You know, why are they doing this?
And all those kinds of experience happened after your near-death experience in 2005. You didn't have any of this before 2005, is that right?
I did have a few experiences. See, at 13, I had my first near-death experience. At 15, Jesus visited me in the back of a church, and 4 other people saw him. And then I started seeing spirits. Then I started getting busy working and having my children and my family, and I was like, I'm closing this door. I can't do both. I was too busy. So that I kind of stopped. Then my grandmother died, and I started seeing her again, and you know, off and on, I would see spirits, and then I had a horrific rollover car accident in 1990, and almost died, and there were angels everywhere, and I knew they were angels, and I talk about that in the book. And then in 1997, I fell backwards on a ramp and hit the back of my head, bounced off the ramp like a rubber ball, and I had a permanent closed head injury. And it took me 8 years to recover from that. Then I got struck by the lightning. Actually, I've been hit by lightning 4 times. Twice was ball lightning, twice was lightning strike. So
What happened when the ball lightning hit you?
Oh, we had lived in this big Victorian house, and the windows, there was little cracks around the windows. And one time I was on the computer, and we had these big, beautiful drapes, and I never knew when it was raining outside. I could never tell. So I was on the computer, and we were having a thunderstorm, and the ball lightning came through the crack in the den window, and it just this big ball of lightning just rolled across the floor and zapped my fingers on the computer, and of course the computer, the keyboard got fried, and my fingers were like, and you know, it was like they tingled, and it kind of went up my arm. But as soon as it hit me and hit the computer board, it arced, and that was it. So that was the first time. The second time, we were sitting on the couch in the living room. We had this big porch. I don't know how it went, but it went underneath the porch, and through the cracks in the window, rolled across the back of the couch and hit me in the back of the head. I was like, really? You know, it just seemed to find me.
Was it really lightning?
It was a ball.
Really lightning though?
Yeah, it was lightning. It was.
When you see spirits, do your dogs also see them?
That's what was funny about that creature that came into my house, that ET thing. My cat saw it because I laid on the floor and I watched. That's how I knew whether it was there or not when it left, because she saw it. But to answer your question about the spirits, I don't have dogs anymore. I have cats. They see things. You can tell.
My dog does too.
Yeah, animals do.
I was wondering, in 2005, we had that near-death experience. Did they show you or tell you about possible reincarnation?
Do you remember me telling you about that spirit named Gray Eagle? He was the one that told me about reincarnation. I had never been raised about that. I wasn't taught about that. So I was really, I didn't know about it. So he was the one, he came to me, I guess, as a mentor, a teacher, a guide. And he taught me many things, and that was one of them. And he told me that God wanted him, well, he called God Great Spirit, Great Mystery, because he was a native. He was Lakota. But he said that that was one of the things that he needed to teach me, and that I needed to honor and respect all traditions, and that was one of the things I needed to know about. I was like, why do I have to know that? He said, because it's going to come up again in your life and you need to know it and you need to understand it. I was like, okay, whatever. And then when he showed it to me, it was like watching mini movies. You know, he sat down next to me and he was very, very careful and very, very cautious, because I was blown away by the whole thing because I had never learned about it. And it was like watching mini movies. And what was interesting about it was he was in it, my granddaughter was in it, my grandson was in it. I was like, oh my gosh. You know, and what was interesting about that was when my grandson was born, I recognized him before he was born. And I recognized my granddaughter. And I've always had a very, very close bond with those two particular children. I mean, I love all my grandchildren, but those two were extremely, I've always had a bond with those two that I didn't understand why. But when he showed me those, 3 or 4 different lifetimes, it was like, oh my gosh, now I understand. But
3 or 4 of your lifetimes.
yes. But it was, they were past lifetimes, and that was his way of teaching me about reincarnation, I guess, or different past lifetimes. And it took me a long time to understand and integrate that into my life, that was a possibility. And because I had never heard about that before. And it was like, wow, okay, well, if you tell me that that's real, then I guess that's real. So.
Did they say anything about hell when they did your teachings?
Yes, hell is a state of being. It's a state of being separated from the love of God, and it's by your choice. It's not like it's a place. It's more of,
Separation.
yeah, it's a separation.
Can you get out of hell like Howard Storm by asking for Jesus, that sort of thing? Or how does
Yeah.
it work?
Yeah, you can get out. It's not, you're not there permanently.
So the Catholics are wrong about permanent condition.
It's not permanent.
Would you consider yourself a walk-in or solo grade?
No. I've heard of that, but no, I don't think so. Is that something you get? Do you think I am?
If we talk later.
Okay.
Talk to Claudia about that, because that's big on her mind, but along the ET lines, if you can see spirits and can you identify ETs as being different from humans when you're walking around? Or do they blend in pretty seamlessly? And here's an easy question to help you. If you're from West Virginia, what was the town, Point Pleasant or whatever, where they had the Mothmen walking around, all the ET people from other worlds that were invaded? Point Pleasant or wherever it was up the Ohio River across from West Virginia. If you're familiar with that. I mean, then there were obviously ETs in the town all around. I mean, have you had that experience of being able to identify ETs walking around?
I stay away from Point Pleasant. I don't know how to answer your question. I'm sorry.
It's difficult to answer.
It is. I really got traumatized by that thing. I really did.
And that's the answer. Then you're traumatized by certain experiences.
Mhm.
That's
I don't know how to get over that. I've tried.
And can Jesus help or anybody help with that?
I've prayed about it. And my grandson told me just a few days ago that he saw a spaceship go over his house. And when we were driving in the car, he said he saw another one. I started shaking. I said, Connor, and he was excited about it. He's 12. And he was calling it to him. I said, don't do that. Don't do that. I said, please don't do that. I said, you don't know what you're doing. I said, don't. And I made him draw a picture of what he saw. And he did. And I have it on my phone and I can show it to you. But he's excited about, I mean, he's a very gifted little boy. And he used to see ghosts and stuff too and whatever. And he was like my granddaughter who could see things. But she saw angels all the time. And but I think life is getting the best of him and he's not able to see like he used to. But he saw the spaceship and I was like flipping out. And he was like, Grandma, why are you shaking? Why are you so scared? I said, you have no idea what you're doing. So my traumatic experience, I guess is hindering my ability to know, pick out which is good and which isn't, because I was traumatized by what that thing, I don't know what that thing did to me. I have the feeling that it was just that particular creature was a carrier or a sentinel, just came to get me, but the actual leader or person that did the examining was
Someone else.
right. Yeah, you understand what I'm trying to say.
Right, well, I'm sorry to ask about that, but I understand what you're saying.
So the ET subject is hard for me. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed your share.
Yeah, let's
Thank
give
you.
Thank you.
let's give Sharon a warm round of applause. Sharon.